And joining me now by phone is Stephen Yates. He's former Deputy Assistant to Vice President Cheney for National Security Affairs. Stephen, I don't want to place any blame with German authorities, but they were getting some warnings about a truck possibly plowing into a crowd earlier this week. How do you prepare? Obviously, they were unable to take action to prevent this attack from taking place. How do you prepare for warnings like that?
Well, it's exceedingly difficult to prepare, even when you have what seems in retrospect to be very specific intelligence. It's very difficult to be on alert in every single place. And, of course, the enemy at this point is feeding on our natural vulnerabilities. I mean, people are in a holiday spirit. They're not as alert as they would be. There have been attacks like this before where people will go off and drive into a crowd. And Europe has made themselves more vulnerable to these things with their open borders and the problem with the migration out of war zones recently.
Now, Steve, we, of course, also had to deal with this assassination in Turkey today. The Russian ambassador getting shot in a very public event by a security guard. Any relation do you see at all between these two events?
Well, it's very, very difficult to know if there's any operational connection. The main connection is that most likely both of these tragic events have some relation to the tragedy that is Syria and the rise of ISIS. That's what's produced the refugee flows into Europe that is destabilizing. Obviously, the Turkish government and the Russian government and what's going on in Syria, they all have clashing interests. Unfortunately, this very, very public assassination, I think, just is another dagger into a NATO treaty ally of the United States.
What about something happening over here, Stephen? Is when there are events like this that are located in Europe, shortly thereafter, there seemed to be something happening in the United States. Should we be on extra alert because of these events?
Well, I think all of our responsible authorities should be giving people warnings to be on the lookout. On the one hand, we want people to enjoy the holiday season. We want people to go about their lives. At the same time, you need to have a heightened sense of awareness. These people are Islamists, and they want to attack an observation of faith that they oppose to and to have maximum impact. This is shutting down the German holiday season for at least a time, and that's what they want to try to accomplish.
And what about tourism over to Europe by Americans? I know there are cautionary notes from State Department. Should people cancel their trips now?
Well, I mean, obviously everyone has to use their own judgment. In some senses, once an attack has occurred, there's a heightened sense of alert everywhere, and it's probably a safer place to go. These people tend to look for softer targets where people have let their guard down. So people just have to use their judgment. Hopefully authorities will be more on alert, and we need to have much, much better tracking and surveillance of where threats are coming from.
Now, Stephen, we don't know exactly the circumstances of the death of the person that was in the passenger of the cab in this truck that plowed into the crowd. We do know that he is dead. We have another suspect who is alive. How successful are the Europeans in squeezing information out of these terrorists once they capture them?
Well, I mean, the track record is not the greatest. And, of course, we have to be very, very wary about what early reports are. We may learn more significant information that turns how this whole episode looks as authorities get some greater detail on who these guys are and how they ended up where they were today. But we have much more aggressive means of getting information, and the Europeans tend to treat this more as a law enforcement matter.
Well, let's get specific. We remember the instance in Belgium where a suspect was essentially free to roam around and caused more damage after he'd been put on several watch lists. Their track record, of course, that's a different country. Germany may be tighter than Belgium, but at the same time, the European track record is not as good as ours, is it?
No, you're exactly right, and that is the biggest concern. They have freedom of movement within Europe in many, many ways. And if you treat it like a law enforcement matter, sometimes you're not as aggressive in being able to stop ongoing problems. And obviously the big concern would be if this is just one act and there will be others that follow or copy.
Stephen, final question. Chancellor Merkel, of course, is known for her open doors policy with immigrants coming in from the Middle East, particularly from Syria. There has been a lot of concern about whether a number of these people were infiltrating from ISIS. This is going to add fuel to that fire, is it not?
It will for sure, we just have to be cautious about what the identity of these guys are and what their actual affiliations would be. But it's definitely consistent with the pattern we've seen elsewhere, and that is deeply, deeply troubling for what has been the postmodern European approach to immigration.
Stephen Yates, thank you so much for talking to us, Stephen. Appreciate it. Lauren.